Today, you and I are going to make homemade slider rolls, Kaiser style. And then I am going to show you 3 ways to put them together so that you can make a simple slider sandwich any night of the week. Timestamps are in the description below if you want to jump to one of the recipes. Hey everybody, I'm Diane Gale from Sustainable Slow Living, and thank you so much for joining me in the kitchen today. Let's get to making those slider rolls right away. I'm going to make the slider rolls in my stand mixer today. If you don't have one, you can very easily make them by hand. So I'm going to start by putting 1.5 teaspoons of sugar into my stand mixer bowl. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 2.25 teaspoons of active dry yeast in the bowl. And then I am going to pour in 3/4 cup of warm water. You want your water to be between 100 and 110 degrees because you want it to be warm enough to bloom your yeast, to bring it to life, but you don't want it to be so warm that it kills it off. And then you're just gonna let it sit for like maybe 10 minutes so that it blooms. And you'll know that it's bloomed because the top of it will get all foamy. So while that's blooming, I am gonna go and get some other things together in the kitchen for the sliders that we're going to make today. And then I'll come back and we'll put the rest of this slider roll recipe together. Our yeast is nice and foamy and all ready to go. So I've got my stand mixer here. I've got my dough hook on my stand mixer. I've got my yeast, my water, my sugar in the bowl. I'm gonna attach that to the stand mixer. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest of the ingredients in here. This is 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I use unbleached all-purpose flour. And then 1 egg and 2 tablespoons of soft butter, and then 1.25 teaspoons of salt. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on low speed, and I'm just going to let those ingredients come together. Once they come together, I'll turn it up just a notch or 2, not all the way to medium speed, and I'll let it knead for 6 minutes. If you don't have a stand mixer and you're doing this by hand, you're going to want to follow all of the steps that I just did and just do them in a large bowl. Mix the dough together by hand, and then you're going to need you'll want to turn it out onto a floured surface, and you're going to want to knead it by hand. And you'll probably need about 10 to 12 minutes by hand as opposed to with the stand mixer. And you just want to knead it until you get a nice, smooth, supple dough. When the dough is done kneading in the stand mixer, or when you're done kneading it by hand, you're just going to take and put it in a bowl. Everyone is going to tell you a greased bowl. I even put that on my instructions online because it's what Google expects to see. I don't ever grease my bowl. I'm going to leave it right in here. I'm going to cover it and I'm going to put it in a warm place for about an hour until it's doubled in size. So I'm going to show it to you now. This is what it looks like now. When it's doubled in size, we're going to punch it down and divide it into equal pieces to make rolls. But for right now, I'm going to cover it and I'm going to get it in a warm place to rise. And I will see you in about an hour when it's time to work with this dough. So it's been about an hour, you guys, and the dough is doubled in size. Just want to show you here. And we've got about double in size. The first thing that you want to do is just gently punch down in the center of your dough to deflate it a little, and then just take and pull it away from the edges. Now if you've oiled your bowl, it's probably not going to really stick to your edges. And then you're going to want to just pull that whole dough ball right out of the bowl. Now I want to weigh my rolls. I don't always do that. Like, as a rule, I don't do that. I'm doing it today because I'm doing recipes for the slider sandwiches on the blog, and I want my rolls to be pretty uniform. I usually go by eye, and then, you know, you have what you have in the end. And they're not all exactly the same size, and really I'm okay with that. But today, we're gonna weigh. I divided the measurement that it weighed out to by 12. And I'm going to go ahead and make little dough balls that size. And then once you have your dough balls, you're just going to take them and you're going to shape them like, you're just going to make them in like a little round, right? And you turn them over and you'll just bring all the edges into the center, right? And then you want to pinch the seams closed that you have from bringing those edges in. Okay, and then you're going to lay your dough ball on the counter, cup it with your hand, and roll it around a little bit to close up that seam. You're not rolling it over. You're just kind of rolling it around on the counter to close up that seam. And you just want to take them with that seam side down and put them on a baking sheet. You just want to leave a little bit of space between them so that they have room to puff up in the oven. You want to work as quickly as you can when you're rolling these. It does take a little while, but the whole time that you're rolling, the dough balls that are here waiting to be rolled are still rising. And the more they rise, the harder they are to work with. So, you know, don't take your time. Do your best to get it done as quickly as you can. And then once you have them all on your silicone baking sheet, you're going to cover them again and you're going to let them rise in a warm spot for about 15 minutes. Now, usually, most recipes, you want to double your rolls in size. And with these, you don't. You just want them to puff up a little bit. So about 15 minutes is all you really need. Once your rolls have risen, you want to take a little bit of whole milk. Make sure you use whole milk because you want the fat content. And you want to just brush it over the top of the rolls. It's going to pool a little bit underneath, and that's fine. I usually do a few at a time, and then I go ahead and I sprinkle my seeds on top of them, because if you do all of them, the seeds won't stick as well, because you want to get them on there while your milk, while they're still wet from the milk. So poppy seeds are what you always see on Kaiser rolls here in northeastern Pennsylvania. I don't know if that is traditional. A Kaiser roll is a German roll. I don't know if that is traditional in Germany, but it is here with the German populations in northeastern Pennsylvania. So poppy seeds are really the way that I like to top these. And you don't use many, right? You just want a little bit just to give a little color to the top of the roll. But today, I'm also going to do half of these with some sesame seeds. And the reason I'm doing that is because one of the slider recipes that we're going to make is loose meat sliders. And I want to use sesame seeds for those. And then you're going to take a sharp knife or a razor blade or your, I can't remember what this is called, a lom, and you're going to put a shallow X in the top. Now a Kaiser roll has like this I think it's 6 scores, and they're kind of rounded. It's called a star shape in the top, and I guess there's a stamp that you can use to do that. I don't have one. I'm not gonna lie, I've never seen one. So stamp doesn't make sense to me because how it would stamp into the dough. I actually am curious and need to look that up online. If anybody knows what that stamp is like or how it works, let me know in the comments. But I'm just going to take this lom and I'm going to do an X. And you want to keep it shallow. You don't want it to be real deep. And then they're going to be ready to go in the oven. You're going to put them in a 350-degree oven for about 15 minutes. If the top of them doesn't brown, which mine usually do not, then I put them under the broiler on low. And again, you have to really keep an eye on them when you do that. But I put them under the broiler on low for just about 2 minutes, and I literally stand there and watch them. And I do that just to get a little bit of color on the top. So I just want to show you what they look like before they're going in the oven. These are all ready to go in. And then I'm going to go and put them in, and I will see you when they're done. So once your rolls come out of the oven, you want to take them off of the baking sheet as quickly as you can. And you want to put them on a wire rack to cool. Anytime that you make bread, you are not supposed to cut right into it because you'll make the inside of it like gum together, and then you don't get that nice tender crumb that you want on the inside. So you should always let your rolls, your loaves, all the breads that you make cool off completely before cutting into them. But I always cut into one because, well, it is delicious when it is warm. And it's okay with me if the texture is a little bit gummy. Put some bread on there while it's still steaming. Big bread. Put some butter on there while it's still steaming. And you can 100% forgive that gummy texture. When you get a taste of that warm, fresh bread with that melting butter, that is so good, you guys. And I haven't eaten anything yet today. It's like 1 o'clock. But also, this is one of these rolls that I made yesterday. So we've got day old here, but I want to show you what the crumb looks like on the inside. And I'm just going to bring it over here to show you. See how that crumb looks? That is a Kaiser style roll. It is perfect for sandwiches because you have the nice tender crumb, but the outside is sturdy, so it's gonna hold up to all of those heavy sandwich fillings. So once you've made a batch of slider rolls, there's like endless ways that you can top them to make slider sandwiches. And today I'm gonna share 3 of my favorite ways to fill these, to stuff these slider rolls to make sandwiches. So not very long ago, I discovered loose meat sandwiches. This, my friend, is a loose meat sandwich. Birthplace, Iowa. And being the recipe nerd that I am, I had to learn how to make this sandwich in my own kitchen. And since then, this sandwich has become one of my favorite ways to make simple slider sandwiches. No need to form a patty, mustard, onions, and pickles. 3 of the best burger toppings out there. It just doesn't get better than this. I've got a pound of ground beef here. It's an 80-20 blend. It's important that you have quite a bit of fat in the ground beef for this sandwich. And then I have a tablespoon of warm water. And I'm gonna take a teaspoon of baking soda and I'm gonna mix it into that water. This is something that's often done in Asian cooking, which is one of the reasons that the meat that you get in an Asian restaurant is so tender. Part of it is how they cut it, and then a lot of times they tenderize it with baking soda. And that's what's gonna make the texture that we want for a true loose meat sandwich. So I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna pour it over the beef. And then I'm gonna get my hand in there and I'm gonna mix it up. When you're mixing your baking soda water into your beef, it's kind of a delicate dance. So you want to mix it in so that it's mixed through well, so that it tenderizes all of the meats. But you don't want to overwork the beef, because if you do, then you're just kind of undoing what you're trying to do with the baking soda. So go ahead and set the meat aside for about 15 minutes to let that baking soda work its magic. And while it does, you can dice some onion. You're going to want about 1 medium yellow onion, and you're going to want it finely diced. And then you're going to want to take about 1/3 of a cup of that, and you're going to want to set it on the side, because you're going to use this to top the loose meat sliders when you serve them. So I've got a 10-inch cast iron skillet here, and that will give me enough room for my beef to cook properly. And I've heated about a tablespoon of olive oil in it. And then I'm going to take those diced onions and I'm going to put them in there with about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just going to cook those until they're translucent. The goal is to not brown them. I just want them to be nice and translucent so that they're soft in the loose meat texture. These are getting pretty translucent and they are starting to brown on me a little. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the beef in here, and then I'm going to start breaking it apart. The whole point of loose meat is that it doesn't have, chunks in it. And it will take time to be able to break this apart to that point. And it will also have to, cook some before it will fully break apart to that point. Once it cooks just a little, and I do mean just a little, you're going to season it. We're going to take and we're going to put a teaspoon of onion powder and a teaspoon of coarse ground black pepper. And then we're going to add just a little bit more salt. So I'm not going to put a lot of salt in at this point, because you can always add salt at the end, and honestly, I never do. I never need it. And once all of those spices are in there, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get this all mixed up really good and continue to break it up. So this is about what you want. And then normally, like if you have a lot of grease, a lot of fat in the bottom of your pan, you're going to want to strain most of it out so that you just have like a light coating on the bottom. Okay, you want a little bit of it in there because you want that flavor. Fat equals flavor. But we don't have to strain this today because we don't have very much. So we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna add the sauces in here. So we're gonna put 2 tablespoons each, right? We're gonna put some ketchup in, and we're gonna put some Worcestershire in, and then we're gonna put in some yellow mustard. And if you're not a fan of yellow mustard, right? I'm not a big fan of yellow mustard. Then you can use a different mustard. Yellow mustard is kind of signature to the original traditional Iowa loose meat sandwich. So when I make this sandwich, I always use it, and I actually do like it in this sandwich. Sometimes when an ingredient is traditional to a dish, you know, it's for a reason. And I feel that way about the yellow mustard in this loose meat sandwich. Another thing that I didn't mention to you before when we were just cooking the beef and the onions was that you don't want to overcook your beef. Overcooking it will toughen it up. So once you have all of your sauces mixed in, if it looks too loose and too saucy, you want to cook it a little bit, right? But if it looks like this, where it's just nice and juicy and all of the sauces are evenly distributed, then you have made the filling for a loose meat sandwich. And I'm going to show you how to put them together the traditional way. So these are very much a fully stuffed sandwich. I like to use 2 spoons to try and get the beef on them. Now it's not going to stay on them, it's going to go all over the dish. And that is okay. But if you use the 2 spoons, I find that, you know, it at least you get a lot in the center of the bun, right? And that's kind of the point. You want a lot on the center of your bun. Look at that. That is great. And then you're going to take, again, yellow mustard, right? Traditionally, that is how it's topped. And you're just going to put a drizzle of that over top. You don't need a ton. You already have it in the meat. But you know, just a nice little S kind of deal. And then we have those onions that we reserved for topping. And we're going to get some of that onion crunch on there. Now I'm just making 3 of these right now because honestly I may need to make fresh ones for a picture later for the blog or whatever, but this recipe makes 6. And then the other traditional topping, I can just get into the jar, gosh that was hard, that goes on them, is dill pickle slices. And I am right now wishing that I had some fresh homemade dill pickle slices. I don't, but there it is, you guys. We're gonna take and put the tops right here, and you have loose meat sliders. They are out of this world. They're perfect for summer. They barely heat up your kitchen, and you're gonna love them. Now, as much as I love a good burger sandwich, and I do, especially in the summer months, when it comes to sandwiches, chicken has my heart. So today we're gonna crisp it up and we're gonna grill it up too. Crispy buffalo chicken sliders and grilled teriyaki chicken sliders. Both of these recipes are just as easy to put together as the loose meat sliders that I just shared with you, and they come together just as quickly too. I like to make my own sauces when I make these chicken sandwiches. You can do that too, or you can just use your favorite sauces. For the crispy buffalo chicken sliders, you're going to need a buffalo sauce. I have a recipe for that on the blog. It's literally 2 ingredients, and it is the sauce that most restaurants here in northeastern Pennsylvania, where I'm from, use, and we're just like an hour and a half away from the home of the original buffalo sauce. So it's the real deal, but you may have one you prefer. And then you're going to need either a ranch dressing or a blue cheese dressing for that sandwich too. There is a recipe for ranch dressing on the blog, and there is a recipe for blue cheese dressing here on the YouTube channel. The dressing that I use is a hybrid of ranch and blue cheese. So I make my homemade ranch dressing, and then I put blue cheese crumbles in it. It's called blanch dressing. It's something that I learned at a restaurant that I worked at in the Pacific Northwest. It is probably my favorite dressing of all time. It's best to make it ahead and let it sit in the refrigerator overnight, because that blue cheese infuses into the ranch dressing, and and the flavors meld together, right? They marry. So you can do whatever you want. Your own, homemade. The recipes are there for you if you need them. So I've got my buffalo sauce and I've got my blanch dressing, which means that I'm ready to get started on the crispy buffalo chicken sliders. I'm going to fry the chicken for this. I use a breaded chicken, right? Crispy chicken, breaded chicken. You can bake them if you prefer. I prefer for the fried so that the buffalo sauce coats them well but doesn't soak into the breading and make it soggy. So I've got my cast iron skillet on the stone here. I've got about a cup of vegetable oil in it heating up, and I'm going to put just 3 chicken fingers in there. Now I'm only doing 3 for the video today, for the same reason that I told you I did 3 for the loose meat sliders. But the recipe that's on the blog calls for 6, and the measurements that I'll give you will all be for 6, just like the recipe, even though I'm only making 3. I picked out some chicken fingers that were smaller because, you know, they'll fit the bun better, but you can cut your chicken fingers if they're too big. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna let these crisp up on both sides. They are pre-cooked, so I don't have to worry about them being cooked. But if your chicken fingers aren't, make sure that you get them cooked all the way through. So while the chicken is cooking, I'm gonna slice up some onions to go on these sandwiches. You need your onion to be as thin as you can possibly slice it. I try to emulate like the onion that comes off of a slicer in a professional sandwich shop. You want it super, super thin. Not sure if you can totally see that or not, but it's really thin. This is a very small detail for this sandwich, but it makes a really, really big difference in the taste of the final sandwich. So these chicken fingers are nice and crispy. I'm gonna turn the oil off. And then I'm gonna take them and I'm gonna let as much of the oil drain from them as possible. Put them in the buffalo sauce, and I'm gonna roll them around and get them all covered. As you can see, easier said than done. Partly because my bowl is too small. I want them well covered, and I want them to stay nice and crispy. So normally I would move much more quickly. In a restaurant, they're just tossed up in the air, and I can do that, but I prefer not to do it in my home kitchen. All right, and then once you have them coated, you're all ready to put that sandwich together. I don't think I told you guys, what you're gonna want for 6 tenders is half a cup of sauce. You get them nice and saucy, and you're just gonna plop them right on that bun. And then you wanna work kind of quickly. All right, so this is the trick to this sandwich. I used to do this with my buffalo sandwich in my food truck, and I had a hard time getting cooks to stick to the rule. They wanted to just throw the onion on top at the end. You want to take this thinly sliced onion and you want to put it right on that crispy, hot chicken tender. What it does is it loosens the flavors in the onion and distributes them through. So you don't have a cooked onion, you have a raw onion. You have crunch, you have bite, you want plenty of it, but you put it right on top of the heat. And I am very generous with it. And then you want to layer some sliced iceberg lettuce. Again, just like I did with the onions, I try and slice this as thin as you would get it off of a slicer in a sandwich shop. I'm not a huge fan of iceberg lettuce, but it is what works on this sandwich. You want a nice, generous little amount of iceberg lettuce on top. And then you want to take your dressing, whatever dressing you're going to use, ranch or blue cheese, pre-made, made in your own kitchen, or if you have taken my suggestion, and oh my god, you'll never be the same if you do, you're going to have blanch. And just take a big spoonful, plop it right on top. And this, my friends, is an amazing buffalo chicken slider. It probably totally seems like I'm hyping up this sandwich to you, and that's because I seriously am. This is such an incredibly tasty sandwich. You're gonna love it. As you can see, it is messy. I am about to get it all over, and I'm okay with that. But I can't wait to have a bite. I should have brought a napkin. You know, when I decided to make these sandwiches, I was just gonna make like a farm style roll, like a dinner roll. And I'm so glad that I decided to make these little mini Kaiser rolls because they are so much better. All right, you guys. You're gonna have to excuse me while I eat this. So the last slider recipe that I'm gonna show you today is probably the easiest of all to make. And you can make it on an outdoor barbecue grill if you have one. It is out of this world that way. But I don't have an outdoor barbecue grill in my new place, but I have this cast iron grill pan, and that's what we're going to use today to make the teriyaki chicken tenders that are gonna go on this sandwich. And you might be tired of hearing me say it, but there is a recipe on the blog for a teriyaki marinade that I use when I make teriyaki chicken or teriyaki anything. I do teriyaki pork and stuff too. So I have made that marinade, and I took some chicken tenderloins and I put them in the marinade probably about 3 or 4 hours ago. You can do that, or you can just marinate them while they're in the pan. I brushed a little bit of oil on the pan because obviously I don't want the chicken tenders to stick. Now the thing about this teriyaki is it has a vinegar in it, and it has amino acids in it, So it's not a long-term marinade. It will break the chicken down. So just a few hours is really all you need. You're going to cook it all the way through, but you don't want to overcook it because you want it to stay tender. And if you haven't marinated your chicken and you're just brushing the teriyaki on it as it cooks, be generous, because all of your teriyaki flavor for the sandwich is right here in the chicken. We're not going to put any other sauce on it. These sliders layer together really, really quick. They're the simplest of the three that I've showed you today. When you cook your tenders, try and get a little crisp on them. You know, if you're using a pan like this, you're going to want to try and get those grill marks on them. I'm still only going to make 3 of these. And all you're going to do is you're going to put your tenders on the bun. You're going to take a slice of red onion, and I just try and size it for the bun. And I didn't show you slicing these because there's really nothing special about it. It's a slice of red onion. You don't want it super thick, but you do want a nice slice. And then you're going to take a slice of pineapple. Now the pineapple is juicy, so you can let that drain ahead of time so that it isn't too juicy on the sandwich. But I usually just take and break it apart a little bit too, because it's usually just a little bit too big. And if you break it apart a little, you'll get a good size for your slider. However, the pineapple is delicious, and it does not hurt to put the whole slice on there either. And here you have the teriyaki chicken sliders. If the red onion seems like an odd addition to you, I encourage you to give it a try, because it really is fantastic combined with the teriyaki and the pineapple. This sandwich is not nearly as picturesque as the others, but it is just as delicious. Just look at these sliders. Slider rolls done 3 different ways with slider stuffings. They are easy. They are delicious. Truly crave-worthy sandwiches right here. I've put links down in the description for all of the recipes that are mentioned today in this video. The sliders, the rolls, the sauces, all of them are available to print on the blog if you prefer to have a hard copy in the kitchen. I'm a hard copy kind of girl, so I like to make that available to you. The blue cheese dressing recipe is the only one that hasn't made it to the blog yet, so you can't print it, but it is available for you here on the YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me here in the kitchen today, and until next time, enjoy every bite.